It's got 4 cameras and even more surprising features for a mid-range phone. Okay, so I think I'm going to try recording this video with the lights turned on behind me because it's getting really dark outside and the sun is setting, and it took me a lot of research and backtracking to get this video right, so hopefully color correction should be a real breeze with this video. So the adding additional camera trend we've been seeing in smartphones lately, and phones like the iPhone 10, the LG V40 just keeps increasing, and now it is increased to having 4 rear cameras on a smartphone. We're seeing it today with the Samsung Galaxy A9. Samsung's been teasing this for a long time. Surprisingly, you would think, is that 4th camera supposed to be an additional zoom lens? But actually that 4th camera is kind of a depth sensor to blur the background, for things like portrait photos. So what exactly does this camera have? We'll go over the specs of the phone itself first before we get into the cameras. So the phone itself has a 6.3-inch Super AMOLED screen. And by the way, the A9 is supposed to be a mid-range phone. So while you're not going to find the absolute highest specs of this phone, and it's going to be glossed over by Samsung and tech journalism websites to sell this phone, they're still actually pretty surprising for a mid-range phone. The screen on the A9's resolution is 2200 by 1080. The phone's got an octa-core or Snapdragon 660 processor. You could have either 6 or 8 gigabytes of RAM. Pretty surprising in a mid-range phone because there are flagships from certain companies that have 4 gigs of RAM. There's 128 gigabytes of storage, and there's a micro SD card slot, so you can add even more. It runs Android Oreo, which I guess since it's a mid-range phone, I'll give it a pass. It's got a fingerprint sensor on the back, USB Type-C. I think there's a headphone jack on this phone. And the phone is coming out in November, but I couldn't find much pricing info, so maybe this phone will cost in the range of $500-$600, which for mid-ranger is kind of pricey, but given the specs and the additional camera on the back, I could see this phone possibly costing in that range. So what do the cameras of the A9 offer? Well, there's a main 24 megapixel camera with an f1.7 lens. This main camera is the one that will be used mainly for low light shots. There's also an 8 megapixel camera with a wide angle 120 degree lens, kind of like we've seen wide angle lenses on LG smartphones. It's got a 10 megapixel telephoto lens that offers a 2x zoom compared to the main lens. And there's a 5 megapixel depth sensor. This is used to blur the background. That blur background bokeh effect we see in a lot of especially portrait photos. And the selfie camera it's actually got a 24 megapixel selfie camera. And by the way, the main camera in low light shots, the A9 uses its 24 megapixel sensor and combines 4 pixels into one to take better low light shots. You do get a 6 megapixel photo in the end, so while nowhere near as high res, it still should be a really nice photo. I mean, 6 megapixels for a smartphone is still pretty good. So again, looking at this phone from more of a mid-range phone, it actually makes it a lot more exciting than it seems on paper. I mean, this could even, in my opinion, pass as a flagship minus its processor. And I know Samsung's been kind of sketchy on details, and even in certain tech journalism websites really sketchy on the details. But when I say this is a mid-range phone, I mean that it doesn't have the most powerful specs of any smartphone out there today. Like the A9, as I mentioned, has a 2200 by 1080 screen, but the flagship Samsung Galaxy S9 has a 2960 by 1440 screen. The A9 has a Snapdragon 660, which is a step below the Samsung Galaxy S9 Snapdragon 845. But again, when you consider that this is a mid-range phone, it actually makes the A9 all the more impressive. It's still a trend. It's still following a trend, in my opinion, rather than being something revolutionary. Like I said in the previous video, ever since the HTC One M8, we've been seeing smartphone makers add more cameras to phones for things like adding a zoom lens or blurring the background in photos. This got really exacerbated when the iPhone 10 came out, and then we saw companies like Samsung and LG starting to add more lenses to their phones. Huawei was one of the first companies to come out with a phone that had 3 lenses. So now we're on to having a smartphone with a 4th lens. And I know I've been saying in a lot of my videos, I've been kind of downplaying my excitement because, oh, it's just adding another lens and that's about it. That's not a revolution in the smartphone world. That's just kind of been the trend of smartphones for the last couple years, I'd say. But still, it's definitely really fun that Samsung is adding a 4th camera lens. I do kind of question, do they need to add this 4th lens if it's just a depth sensor, like it's just there to blur the background in especially low light shots? I guess not, but it still serves a similar purpose because, we've seen phones where they add an additional lens to blur the background, like we saw on the iPhone 10, for example. But it's still, if it, serves its purpose and it does it well, then it should still do the job okay. So I think that's all that matters. Do they need to add a 4th lens? I guess not, but it's still, pretty cool that it can do the job it does. We've seen phones where their cameras were able to blur the background in the past. And I guess the thing for me that would make this phone even more exciting is if we were able to go back to just having one lens where it optically zoomed. Like you guys might remember in the past, we used to see touchscreen compact cameras like the Nikon Coolpix S100 with a 5x optical zoom. And the thing about cameras like that, it wasn't that the zoom lens on those cameras, actually stuck out. It was more embedded, they optically zoom, but it didn't have to protrude out of the camera. But then again, if we did have smartphones with those kind of cameras, they would get pretty thick, or that the front element of those rear cameras are going to have to stick out more. The Nikon S100 was about 18.1 millimeters thin, while the Samsung Galaxy A9 is 7.8 millimeters thin. So I guess if they added a single zoom lens, it would just make the phones a bit too thick for mid-range phones. I think some people may not mind it, but it may just come from the camera community. Those would be probably the ones that would get the most out of it. I know a while back Samsung introduced the Samsung Galaxy S4 Zoom, which had a 10x optical zoom, but that had the kind where the zoom lens actually protruded from the camera, so it looked really awkward. It looked much more like a compact camera than a smartphone, and I know Samsung doesn't want to go there even for a mid-range product. And also, if they just went back to having one lens, it would be much more difficult to blur the background because a smartphone sensor is much smaller compared to a mirrorless camera's image sensor or DSLR, it's much tougher to blur the background when you only have one lens to work with, and hence why we see phones from companies like Apple and Samsung where they add an additional lens so it can blur the background in photos. So while I think the Samsung Galaxy A9 is more following a trend than being a trend setter, and I just noticed that my cat Elby's in my video background. I'll just finish my video since my cat really wants to be here. But anyway, I'll finish it off saying that while I think the A9 is more following a trend than being a trendsetter, I think that mid-range customers will definitely get some use out of having that at 4th lens. Some may not even realize what that 4th lens does, but I think they're really going to like, especially the portrait pictures this camera takes. So just hoping that the Samsung Galaxy A9 takes really good pictures. I mean, Samsung phones have taken good pictures in the past, so I probably shouldn't worry about that. But I think the A9 definitely sounds like a competent mid-range phone, but it's got a 4-lens camera. It's its trick up its sleeve. So, all right, guys, please post your thoughts down below. Are you interested in the Samsung Galaxy A9? Do you think that the A9 should have a 4th lens? Does it need it? Please post all your thoughts down below. If you have any ideas for future videos, you can let me know in the comments, or you can also email me. My email address is in the description. And now my cat is leaving the video. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all later. Hey guys, be sure to like this Blood Moon Bobby video if you enjoyed it. Please share this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment. Be sure to ring the notification bell to be notified about my latest upload. Follow me on my social media pages at Blood Moon Bobby to find out about what I'll be covering next and for more of my opinions. Thanks for watching.